"Forget to fill it out, son?" I asked. He laughed. Cold. Oh, must have grabbed the wrong one. But when Karen snatched the card from my hands, her face turned ghost white, like I'd just opened the wrong envelope, like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. That's when I knew this wasn't about a forgotten signature. That blank card wasn't empty. It was a message. By the time they walked out 47 minutes later, my whole estate was already halfway. Stolen. Transfers in motion. Forged signatures in place. But what Karen didn't know was, I still had every original document. Notarized, dated, ironclad. And her voice, her exact words, were caught on tape. They thought I was too old to fight. They forgot who taught them how to win. Now they're racing the clock and the ticking, that's my father's watch, counting down to the day I take everything back. My name is Frank Delaney, and I'm 75 years old. Each morning I sit in my oak-paneled study, reviewing ledgers and contracts from the furniture business I built with my own hands over 50 years. My son Darren, who used to stand proud beside my workbench, now barely meets my eyes during his brief visits with his wife Jessica. Their excuses for leaving early have become routine. The familiar weight of my father's pocket watch rests in my palm, its steady ticking a reminder of time's relentless march. In my bottom desk drawer, I keep every original document, every handshake deal formalized in duplicate, notarized, and filed with the precision that built my reputation. But let me start from the beginning. I'd set the table with Mom's old china, the good stuff with the blue flowers that only came out for holidays. Father's Day lunch wasn't usually a big production at my house, but tradition matters. The roast was done just right, and the potatoes were creamy the way Michael used to beg for them when he was knee-high. You know that feeling when something's off, but you can't put your finger on it? That's how it felt watching Michael and Karen step through my front door at exactly noon. Too precise, like they'd rehearsed it, Michael gave me one of those quick hugs that barely wrinkles your shirt, while Karen hung back, clutching her purse like it might try to escape. "Happy Father's Day, Dad," Michael said, handing me a card. The envelope was crisp, expensive, the kind you get from those specialty shops downtown. We settled in around the oak table, the same one where I'd helped Michael with his math homework 30 years ago. The conversation stayed polite, like strangers making small talk about the weather. Karen barely touched her food, her eyes darting between Michael and me like she was keeping score. "The business doing well?" I asked, trying to bridge the silence. "Fine," Michael said. "We're restructuring some things." Karen's fork clinked against her plate. Funny how loud small sounds can be when nobody's really talking. I saved the card for dessert, always did. That's when I noticed something strange about the weight of the envelope, like it was missing something. Inside was a beautiful card, all gold embossing and thick paper. But when I opened it, nothing. Just blank space where words should have been. I looked up at Michael, keeping my voice gentle. "Forget to fill it out, son." He laughed. Sharp, like glass breaking. Oh, must have grabbed the wrong one from the store. But it was Karen's reaction that set off every alarm bell I'd developed in 50 years of business. Her face went white, like she'd seen a ghost, and her hand shot out to snatch the envelope. "I'll get you a new one," she said, but her fingers trembled. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything warm and familiar. Dad's pocket watch ticked in my vest pocket, suddenly too loud in the quiet room. Each click felt like it was counting down to something I wasn't ready to face. I served the apple pie anyway, because that's what you do. You keep your manners when your gut's telling you something's wrong. I watched them pick at their dessert, caught their whispered consultations when they thought I was busy with the coffee pot. Karen checked her phone 4 times in 10 minutes. "Early day tomorrow," Michael announced, standing up before his pie was finished. Another too quick hug. Karen's mumbled thanks and they were gone. The whole visit lasted exactly 47 minutes. I know because I kept checking that damn watch. Back in my study, I laid the empty card on my desk right next to Dad's watch. The paper was high quality, the kind that costs $5 or more. Nobody buys an expensive card just to leave it blank. I ran my fingers over the fibers, studied the precise folds. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was a message. The watch kept ticking, each sound like a footstep getting closer to something I couldn't see yet. Through my window, I watched the sun sink behind old Mrs. Peterson's maple tree, painting my study in shadows that felt heavier than usual. I knew I wouldn't sleep until I checked everything. 50 years of contracts, deeds, bank statements, all filed away in the bottom drawer of my desk. Each document a brick in the wall I'd built to protect what I'd earned. As midnight crept in, I slid my key into the drawer's lock. The metal was cool against my fingers, and the click of the mechanism sounded final, like a judge's gavel. Coming down. You know what 50 years in business teaches you? Paper tells stories, not just in what's written, but in the weight, the texture, the way ink bleeds into fiber. I'd spent a lifetime reading those stories, and now, as midnight ticked past, I was about to read one I never wanted to find. I spread everything across my study desk in neat rows: property deeds on the left, trust documents center, bank statements stacked by date on the right. Dad's pocket watch kept time from its brass stand, each tick echoing in the quiet house. Remember when paperwork meant security? Those days felt far away now. Starting with the trust papers, I'd signed those originals just last spring. First page looked right, but something caught my eye on the second signature block. The strokes were lighter. I pulled out my magnifying glass, the kind I used for checking fine print on contracts. Sure, enough the pressure points were wrong. My real signature digs deeper on the downstrokes, especially the F in Frank. This one skated across the surface like it was afraid to leave marks. Well, I'll be damned, I muttered, reaching for my red pencil. Circle that one. Then I noticed the date alignment on page 4 was off by a hair, just enough to make my neck prickle. Another red circle. When I got to Appendix C, my heart actually stopped for a beat. The original should have been there. Cream-colored paper with raised notary seal in the corner. Instead, I found a photocopy, held it up to my desk lamp, and there they were. Tiny dots around the edges where someone had cleaned up the scan. The real appendix, the one listing my property holdings, was gone. You ever get that feeling when puzzle pieces suddenly lock together? Karen's face going white over that blank card made a whole lot more sense now. This wasn't about forgetting to write a message. This was about hoping I wouldn't notice what was missing. I grabbed my phone and started taking pictures. Every questionable signature, every misaligned date, every substitute page. Evidence. The word felt bitter in my mind, but that's what it was. The bank statements were next. Last 6 months showed regular transfers, sweep accounts they called them, moving money into new sub-accounts I'd never authorized. Small amounts at first, like testing the water, then bigger chunks, always just under the reporting threshold. Clever. Had to give them that. My hands were starting to shake, so I made coffee. Standing in the kitchen, waiting for it to brew, I caught my reflection in the window. Same face I'd seen for 75 years, but tonight it looked older. The coffee maker sputtered and hissed, filling the quiet with something besides that damned watch ticking. Back at my desk, I started a list of questions for Michael. Simple ones first. When did you forge my signature? How long have you been planning this? Then the harder ones. Did you ever think about just asking? Did I raise you to steal? By 3 in the morning, my palms were aching from gripping pens and papers. The evidence sat in neat stacks, each discrepancy marked in red, like blood drops on snow. I placed that blank Father's Day card on top, the thing that started this whole investigation. Funny how empty space can say so much. I watched the sun come up through my study window, thinking about Michael as a kid, learning to write his name at this very desk. Now here I was, studying his forgeries of mine. The irony would have been perfect if it didn't hurt so much. At exactly 6 a.m., I picked up the phone. Michael answered on the 4th ring, voice thick with sleep. "We need to talk," I said, my voice as cold as the coffee I hadn't touched. "In person. This afternoon." "Dad, I've got meetings." "Cancel them." The word came out like ice breaking. 3 o'clock, my office. There was a long pause before he answered. "Fine." I hung up without saying goodbye. The watch kept ticking, but now it sounded less like a countdown and more like a hammer driving nails into something solid. Something that needed to be built, or maybe torn down. I got to the workshop early, needed time to steady myself. Those old photographs on the wall caught my eye, the ones from our first deliveries back in '72. They hung a bit crooked now, yellowed at the edges. There's something about workshop air that never changes. Sawdust and machine oil. Honest smells that had filled my lungs for 50 years. Michael showed up right at 3, wearing one of those suits that cost more than my first truck. He didn't look at the photos. I'd laid out the papers on my workbench, original signatures next to the forgeries, trust documents beside their altered copies. Everything neat and organized, just like I'd taught him. Want to explain these? I kept my voice steady, sliding the signature comparisons toward him. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, making the differences even clearer. He stared at the floor for a long moment, scuffing his Italian leather shoes against concrete that had been here longer than he had. Then something changed. His chin came up, and I saw a hard light in his eyes I'd never seen before. "The future belongs to us," he said, like he was reading from some script. "You had your time, you had your turn." The words hit me like a physical blow. I tasted metal in my mouth, blood maybe, and that old pocket watch in my vest seemed to pound instead of tick. 40 years of teaching him about honor and family name, had it meant nothing? "And these?" I tapped the bank statements, showing the sub-accounts. "What do you call moving money without authorization?" He shrugged, hands in his pockets. "Restructuring, modernizing, the business needs to evolve. Remember when your kids were little, how a simple scrape could break your heart? This was worse. This was watching my son choose to become something I never thought he could be." "Michael," I said, keeping my voice as level as a spirit gauge, "what you're doing isn't restructuring. It's theft. Plain and simple. I want those transfers reversed. Today." The smirk that crossed his face, I'll never forget it. He jangled his keys, already turning toward the door. "The lawyers are already involved, Dad. Maybe you should get one too." The door closed behind him, and I stood there in that familiar workshop air that suddenly felt thin and cold. Back in my study, my hands shook as I logged into the bank portals. Numbers don't lie. That's what I always said. But sometimes you wish they would. Large sums had been moved into staging accounts, just waiting to be shifted somewhere permanent, somewhere out of reach. I clicked through screen after screen, each one worse than the last. Then I saw it. A pending transfer batch, scheduled to process within days. Status: awaiting final authorization. My old pocket watch ticked on the desk, marking time while my life's work hung by a thread. "Jesus, Michael," I whispered to the empty room. "What have you done?" The worst part wasn't the betrayal, though that cut deep enough. It was remembering him at 12, standing proud in this very office, learning how to write receipts, how careful he'd been then, practicing his signature, until it was perfect. Now here I was staring at his forgery of mine, wondering if he'd taken the same care with that. Those were the thoughts churning in my head as I stared at that pending transfer notice. All those years of work, of building something solid, something that would last. And now it was balanced on the edge of vanishing, all because my own son had decided that waiting for his inheritance was too inconvenient. After Michael left, I spent hours in my study organizing everything I had. You know how it is when you're racing against time. Your mind wants to sprint, but experience tells you to move steady, methodical. So I lined up all the notarized originals on the left side of my desk, their scanned backups on the right. Between them I built a timeline of every transfer going back 6 months, each sticky note marking another piece of my legacy being chipped away. The numbers made my stomach turn. If that pending batch cleared, and it was set to clear within days, I'd lose access to nearly everything liquid, the kind of funds you need to mount a proper legal defense. They'd be gone, probably scattered across accounts I couldn't touch. I drafted urgent letters to the banks explaining the situation, requesting immediate freezes. But banking's changed since my day. Everything needs committees now, reviews, signatures in triplicate. Time we didn't have. Around 8 that evening I called Jack Morrison. We'd started our businesses around the same time, back when a handshake meant something. "Frank," he said, voice heavy with concern, "you need a lawyer, tonight if possible. This isn't the kind of thing you can fight with just paperwork anymore." My second call was to Pete Williams. He'd retired from his accounting firm 5 years ago, but he knew more about estate law than most attorneys. His advice was the same. "Get counsel, Frank, get it now." The room had grown dark while I was on the phone. I hadn't bothered with the lights. Funny how the darkness matches your mood sometimes, isn't it? My shoulders finally gave in, slumping forward as I sat there. All those years of standing straight, standing proud, they felt heavy now. The pocket watch sat silent on my desk. I picked it up, feeling its familiar weight. My father had given it to me when I opened my first shop. A business runs on trust and timing, he'd said. Now my own son was proving him half right at least. I might have lost this one, I said out loud to the empty room. The words tasted like defeat. They moved faster than I expected. Planned better than I taught them to. You spend decades building something solid, something that matters, and you think that's enough. You think the strength of what you've built will protect it. But sometimes the people closest to you know exactly where the weak spots are. I got up, legs stiff from sitting too long, and set the coffee maker for morning. Habit, I suppose. Always face trouble with a clear head. Another thing my father taught me. Back at my desk, I scrawled "freeze window" on a yellow legal pad. The question mark looked like a hook, ready to snag whatever hope was left. The watch kept ticking in the darkness, counting down time I couldn't afford to lose. I thought about all the people who used to know me, really know me. The ones who remembered when your word was your bond, when reputation meant more than quick profit. If anybody's still out there, I whispered, anybody who remembers the old ways. I let the words trail off. What was I expecting? Some miracle to walk through the door? Then I heard it. A knock, sharp, decisive. 3 raps that cut right through the watch's steady tick. I opened the door, and there stood Tom Jenkins, water dripping from his old fedora onto his shoulders. Some things never change. He'd worn that same hat since our days in Nam. Even now, pushing 70 himself, he carried it like a badge of honor. "Frank," he nodded, serious as always. "Got your message? Figured this couldn't wait till morning. Coming out of that rain, Tom." I stepped aside, grateful for the familiar sight of him. That hat had seen us through firefights, legal battles, and more than a few late-night strategy sessions. "Studies this way, though you probably remember." "Been a while," he said, following me down the hallway. "But some places stick with you." The study looked different now, with all my papers spread out under the desk lamp like evidence at a crime scene. Tom took one. Look at the red-line documents, and his breathing changed. Got slower, more focused. I'd seen that shift before, back when we were young and trouble was brewing. It meant his mind was already working the angles. "Tell me about Father's Day," he said, hanging his hat on the coat rack. "Your message mentioned something about your daughter-in-law's reaction." I walked him through it, trying to keep my voice steady. Karen went white as printer paper when she saw that empty card, grabbed the envelope like it was burning her fingers. Then Michael, he just laughed it off, but it wasn't natural, you know what I mean? Tom nodded, already leafing through the papers. "Got any old trust addenda? The obscure stuff nobody usually reads?" "You know me better than that." I pulled out a thick black binder from the bottom drawer. Inside, every page was organized by date, with notarized duplicates behind, each original. Never throw anything away, that's what my father taught me. Rain drummed against the window while Tom read, his finger tracing down each page like he was defusing a bomb. When he hit page 43, his eyes sharpened. "Frank, look at this." He pointed to a dense paragraph buried in the survivorship clause. "See this subparagraph here? About transfer restrictions?" I leaned in, squinting at the legal language. "What about it?" "It requires your recorded assent for any major transfers. Not just a signature, recorded assent." Tom tapped the page. "They overlooked this. Probably figured the signatures were enough. And that helps us how?" The rain tracked down the window in crooked lines, but I felt something else tracking through me now, a thin current of hope. "It means we can file for an emergency freeze," Tom said, already pulling out his phone. "If, and this is the crucial part, if we can get it filed before those final authorizations clear." "When did you say those were scheduled?" 2 days from now." I glanced at my father's pocket watch on the desk. "Maybe less." Tom looked up at me, his face set in that same determined expression I remembered from decades ago. "We have 48 hours, Frank. We move now or not at all." Morning came too fast, but I'd barely slept anyway. Tom showed up at 7 sharp, thermos in hand, looking like he hadn't slept either. The rain had cleared, leaving that crisp air that always reminded me of early workshop mornings, back when Michael was just a boy helping me sand cabinets before school. "Ready to work?" Tom asked, settling at my dining room table. "Born ready." I'd already laid out 3 banker's boxes of documents, each one labeled and indexed. "You handle the legal writing. I'll build you an evidence. Mountain they can't climb over." "Just like old times," Tom said, powering up his laptop. "You always did know how to organize a fight." While Tom hammered away at the emergency motion, I spread my work across the other end of the table. Every document needed its own affidavit, every signature sample had to be authenticated, and the chain of custody had to be airtight. One loose thread, and the whole thing could unravel. Need the county recorder's office, I muttered, reaching for my phone. The number was still in my contacts. You don't forget people who've stamped your paperwork for 30 years. Frank Delaney, I said when Sarah picked up. Need to verify some stamp logs from the trust filing back in '98. The meticulous Mr. Delaney, she laughed. Give me the dates. I read them off, and she confirmed every entry. Want me to email you the certification? Please and thank you, Sarah. Might need you to testify if this goes south. For you, Frank? Anytime. Next call was to Margaret Chen, the notary who'd witnessed the original trust execution. She'd retired to Florida, but still kept her logs. Of course I remember that day, she said. You had that beautiful mahogany desk you'd just finished. The one with the eagle inlays, I finished, smiling despite everything. Still sits in my study. I'll send you a sworn declaration right away, she said. Nobody messes with my notarizations. By 11, I had everything organized in duplicate. One set scanned and sent to Tom, the other packed carefully in my old fireproof case, the same one that had saved our contracts during the workshop fire of '82. Heading your way, I texted Tom, then drove across town to his office. His secretary waved me straight through. Perfect timing, Tom said, barely looking up from his screen. Just finishing the TRO language. Banks won't be able to touch those accounts once this hits. I set the case on his desk. Everything's indexed to your motion citations. Originals, duplicates, and authentications all tabbed. You always did make my job easier. Tom hit print, then grabbed his jacket. I'm filing this myself. Some things you don't trust to runners. My phone buzzed just as Tom headed out. Michael's name flashed on the screen. What the hell are you doing? He didn't bother with hello. Dragging the family through mud like this? I kept my voice level, hit the record button like Tom had showed me. Following the law, son. Just like I taught you. It's pathetic, he spat. You can't stand losing control, can you? We can talk when your lawyer's present. I ended the call, noted the time and contents in my log. My hand wasn't even shaking. Funny how clarity steadies you. I pulled up the court's portal on my phone, refreshing every few minutes. At 1:47, our case number appeared. CV 2023-1847. Emergency motion for asset freeze and temporary restraining order. Tom called at 2:15. Filed and served. Now we wait. I was about to ask how long when my phone chimed with a new portal alert. The clerk had posted a hearing slot. 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Cutting it close, I said, when Tom called back. That's barely inside our window. Sometimes close is all you get, Tom replied. At least we're on the calendar. I'll see you at 8 sharp, front steps of the courthouse. I looked at my father's watch after hanging up. 23 hours left. The second hand swept on, steady as ever, counting down to a moment I never thought I'd face. Tom and I climbed the courthouse steps at dawn, our footsteps echoing off marble in the empty halls. Only the cleaning crew and a few early bird clerks shuffled around under those harsh fluorescent lights. Made me think of those pre-dawn hours at the workshop, when I'd arrive before anyone else just to enjoy the quiet and plan the day ahead. Let's run through it one more time, Tom said, leading us to a bench outside courtroom 3. He pulled out his notes while I adjusted my tie. Funny how some habits stick. I'd knotted a double Windsor every workday for 50 years, but my fingers still trembled getting it straight this morning. The trust survivorship clause is ironclad, Tom continued, tapping his legal pad. Without your recorded consent, those transfers are dead in the water. Judge Matthews is a stickler for proper procedure. She'll appreciate the detailed paper trail. I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. And the notary declarations? Margaret's testimony carries weight. She's got a spotless reputation, and her records match perfectly with the county stamps. Tom checked his watch. We've got everything lined up. Just stay calm and let me handle the talking. The marble hallway amplified approaching footsteps, sharp clicks of expensive shoes that made my spine stiffen. Michael's lawyer, Harrison Price, rounded the corner first, the kind of suit that probably cost more than my first delivery truck. Michael and Karen trailed behind him, not meeting my eyes. Price carried a thick manila folder like it was made of gold. The smirk on his face sent a chill through my gut. He knew something we didn't. "Mr. Jenkins?" Price nodded to Tom, ignoring me completely. "I trust you've informed your client about our filing." Tom frowned. "What filing?" Price's smile widened as he pulled a document from his folder. "Just submitted this morning. Emergency petition for conservatorship. We have serious concerns about Mr. Delaney's mental competency to manage his affairs." The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. Tom snatched the papers, scanning quickly. "This is absurd," he growled. "Frank's mental acuity is perfectly sound." "That's for the court to decide," Price said smoothly. "We have documentation suggesting cognitive decline, including several concerning incidents." I caught Michael's eye then. His jaw flexed with satisfaction, and Karen's face glowed with poorly hidden relief. They'd planned this probably for months. Every forgotten appointment they'd mentioned, every conversation they'd twisted, all ammunition for this moment. The bailiff opened the courtroom doors and we filed in. Judge Matthews was already at the bench reading through files. "Your Honor," Price started as soon as we were seated, "given the new petition, we move to consolidate these matters. Mr. Delaney's competency must be established before any discussion of asset freezes." My heart pounded against my ribs as Tom rose to object. "Your Honor, this is a transparent delay tactic. The transfer window closes tomorrow." "Which makes timing critical," Judge Matthews interrupted, peering over her reading glasses. "If Mr. Delaney lacks capacity, the court has a duty to protect his interests." She studied both tables. "I'm setting an emergency competency hearing for tomorrow at 2 p.m. We'll address the asset freeze petition immediately after, depending on the outcome." The gavel crack made me flinch. 24 hours. They'd found a way to run out the clock. I barely registered Tom gathering our files or Price's satisfied murmur to his clients. My eyes fixed on my father's watch, its steady tick now feeling like a countdown to erasure. "All rise," the bailiff called. As we stood, I caught Michael's reflection in the courtroom's wall-length mirror. His jaw was still flexed, triumph written in every line of his face. Karen's eyes glittered with relief beside him, her hand squeezing his arm. My carefully built momentum, all our meticulous preparation. It felt like sand slipping through my fingers. Tomorrow afternoon suddenly loomed like a cliff's edge, with everything I'd built balanced on the brink. The judge's gavel sat silent on its block, but its echo seemed to fill my head. "Tomorrow at 2 p.m., tomorrow at 2 p.m., tomorrow at 2 p.m. Tom's office felt smaller at night, the walls closing in as we spread our defense across his conference table. Medical records from my last physical, bank statements showing precise reconciliation, even copies of emails where I'd caught accounting errors in supplier invoices, everything that proved I was still sharp as ever. "Run through the timeline again," Tom said, pushing a fresh cup of coffee my way. The clock on his wall showed 9:45 p.m. and my eyes were starting to burn. "Started the business in 73, I began, then caught myself. "No, 72, December of 72. My stomach knotted at the slip. "Take your breath," Tom said quietly. "Start with last year's audit." I closed my eyes, found the thread. March 2023. Full compliance review showed 0 discrepancies. I personally reconciled every account, which is when I first noticed the irregular transfer patterns. The details flowed easier now, anchored in numbers I'd checked dozens of times. "Good," Tom nodded. "And the trust modifications?" October 2021. Michael requested changes to the distribution schedule. I denied it because the date suddenly felt foggy. Was it October or November? Fatigue crept in at the edges of my mind, making simple facts feel distant. "Frank?" Tom's voice carried concern. "I'm fine," I insisted, but my voice wavered. "Just tired. They'll use that tomorrow, won't they? Every hesitation, every pause, they'll say it's confusion." "They'll try," Tom admitted. "But we've got documentation backing every decision you've made. Recent ones, too, like that supplier contract you negotiated last month." I pulled out my notebook, the pages dense with my cramped handwriting. "We need to connect everything, show how each choice followed clear reasoning." For the next 2 hours, I dictated while Tom typed, weaving facts into narrative. The medical records proved regular checkups, all clear. The business logs showed daily hands-on management. Recent emails demonstrated sharp attention to detail. But would it be enough? My own voice sounded hollow in my ears as exhaustion crept in. "You need rest," Tom insisted around midnight. "Being overtired tomorrow will hurt more than any gaps in our prep." I shook my head. Can't leave anything to chance. Not with everything at stake, but he was right. My focus was slipping. Simple dates felt like puzzles, and my hands had developed a slight tremor that made even holding my coffee cup uncertain. The drive home felt longer than usual, streetlights blurring into yellow streams. My house stood dark and silent, the rooms too big without family to fill them. I flipped on my study lights, letting muscle memory guide me to the desk. Photos lined the shelves. Michael at 12, holding his first hand-planed board. His eyes had been so proud then, eager to learn every technique. I remembered guiding his hands, teaching him how grain direction affected the cut, how to feel when the wood was ready to yield. "Square the joint first," I'd told him. "Everything else follows from that foundation." When had that eager boy turned into someone who could look me in the eye and dismiss 50 years of work? When had lessons about craft become weapons of entitlement? My hands were shaking again, worse now. I pressed them flat against the desk's cool surface, watching the tremors ripple through my fingers. The weakness felt like betrayal, my own body providing evidence for their claims. The pocket watch ticked steadily beside me, marking time toward tomorrow's judgment. Its rhythm had always been a comfort, a constant companion through decades of work. Now each click felt like footsteps approaching a cliff's edge. "Maybe you're right, Michael," I whispered to the empty room. "Maybe the future doesn't have room for old men who still believe in things like respect and earning your way." The watch's next tick seemed to hesitate, like a skipped heartbeat, and in that tiny pause I heard every year of my age pressing down at once. The courthouse lobby buzzed with whispers as Tom and I made our way through security at 1:45 p.m. My suit felt stiff. I'd pressed it twice that morning, checking every crease until the iron ran dry. Funny how clothes you've worn 100 times can suddenly feel like armor. "Remember," Tom murmured as we climbed the stairs, "let them talk. The more they reach, the thinner their claims get." I nodded, clutching my evidence binder. Each tab was color-coded, each document arranged chronologically. I'd checked the order 5 times since dawn, my fingers knowing each page by touch. The weight felt reassuring, like holding 50 years of proof in my hands. The courtroom doors opened to a surprisingly full gallery. Small towns love their drama, I suppose. I recognized faces from the Chamber of Commerce, a few long-time customers, even old Bill from the hardware store. Their eyes followed us to the plaintiff's table, some nodding, others quickly looking away. My pocket watch rode in my vest pocket, its familiar weight centered over my heart. I slipped it out and placed it carefully beneath the table's edge, where I could see its face. The time was 1:57 p.m. At precisely 2:00, the bailiff called us to order. Judge Martinez entered, her reading glasses catching the fluorescent light as she settled behind the bench. She had a reputation for fairness, but her expression gave nothing away as she reviewed the consolidated petitions. "Matter of Delaney Estate," she announced. "Counsel may proceed." Michael's lawyer stood with practiced confidence, his grey suit probably worth more than my first delivery truck. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of protecting a vulnerable senior from his own declining judgment." The words hit like hammer blows, but I kept my face neutral. Tom had drilled that into me. Show nothing. Let them overplay their hand. "Mr. Delaney exhibits classic signs of cognitive deterioration," the lawyer continued. "Repetitive storytelling, misplaced items, unsafe decision-making. His resistance to necessary estate modifications demonstrates exactly the rigid thinking that concerns his family." I watched Michael nod solemnly from the gallery. He'd changed his tie since yesterday, the blue silk one I'd given him last Christmas. The irony tasted bitter. They called Michael to testify first. He painted a picture I barely recognized. A doddering old man who couldn't keep track of his tools, who told the same war stories at every dinner, who stubbornly refused to modernize the business. "Last month," Michael said, his voice heavy with manufactured concern, "I found him in the workshop at midnight trying to repair equipment he should have replaced years ago. When I suggested updating our inventory system, he insisted on keeping paper ledgers, just like he has since 1972. My fingers found the watch's smooth case. Its tick remained steady while my pulse jumped. Paper ledgers had caught their forgeries, but I couldn't shout that across the courtroom. Karen took the stand next, all concerned frowns and worried glances. "He gets confused about appointments," she testified. "Makes impulsive decisions about contracts. Just last week, he nearly signed a supply agreement without reading the terms." That was a direct lie. I'd spent 3 days reviewing that contract, marking every clause that needed revision. The final version sat in my binder, its margins filled with my detailed notes. But Karen's performance was flawless. Her voice trembling just enough to suggest reluctant truth-telling. Hour by hour they built their case, every story twisted, every detail reframed to suggest confusion rather than experience. The judge's pen moved constantly, her expression unchanged as the portrait of my supposed senility took shape. Tom caught my eye and tapped his notepad twice, our signal for patience. But I felt the energy draining from my spine as each new accusation landed. They'd prepared well, hitting every mark that might suggest mental decline. Finally, after what felt like years, the opposition rested. Judge Martinez adjusted her glasses and turned to our table. "Counsel," she addressed Tom, "do you have any evidence that could conclusively establish your client's current competence?" The watch ticked once, loud in the sudden silence. Everything would turn on Tom's next words. Tom rose slowly, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to play a short audio recording." He held up a thumb drive. "We've submitted foundation documents, an IT service log, and metadata affidavit from the technician who recovered this file. You know that moment when the air seems to crystallize, when you can feel every molecule freeze in place? That's what happened when Michael's spine went rigid and Karen's eyelids dropped in that too slow blink. I'd seen that same blink at Father's Day when she'd spotted the empty card. "Approach, counsel," Judge Martinez directed. Tom and the opposition lawyer stepped forward. Papers shuffled, voices murmured. I kept my eyes on my son and daughter-in-law, watching the color drain from their faces as the judge examined whatever documentation Tom had provided. The opposing counsel's objection cut through the silence. "Your Honor, this is clearly an attempt to ambush." "Overruled," Judge Martinez interrupted, studying a sheet through her reading glasses. "The metadata verification appears proper, and the IT service log establishes chain of custody. You may proceed, Mr. Jenkins." Tom nodded to the court clerk, who wheeled over a small speaker system. My hands found the pocket watch again, its steady rhythm anchoring me as Tom inserted the drive. The first sounds were muffled. Papers, shifting, a chair creaking. Then Karen's voice clear as crystal. "No, Michael, look at how he writes it. The D in Delaney has this little curl at the bottom. You need to match that exactly." My stomach clenched. I developed that flourish back in '72, signing my first major contract. Made it my trademark, you might say. Now here was my daughter-in-law teaching my son how to forge it. Michael's chair scraped against the courtroom floor. I didn't need to look. I could picture him shifting, uncomfortable as his own voice emerged from the speaker. "What about this other page?" Michael asked in the recording. "Leave page 3 out completely," Karen replied. "We'll say it was a copy error if anyone asks. The banks won't check that closely once they have the transfer authorizations." The judge's expression sharpened like a blade. She leaned forward, pen forgotten in her hand, as Karen's recorded voice continued outlining their plan. Vindication surged through me, hot and fierce, but right behind it came a wave of grief so profound it nearly took my breath away. This was my son, my boy, who used to follow me around the workshop, learning every tool, asking endless questions. Now here he was, letting his wife teach him how to steal his father's legacy. The opposing counsel shot to his feet. "Objection. There's no proof of when this was recorded or under what circumstances." "Counsel," Judge Martinez cut in, "the IT log clearly shows this file's creation date, and the metadata affidavit confirms its authenticity. The objection is overruled." Tom stood quietly, hands clasped behind his back, as Karen's voice filled the courtroom again. "His signature has to be perfect on these transfer forms. The trust paperwork we can explain away, but the bank documents have to look authentic." The gallery had gone completely still. Even the usual courthouse background noise, shuffling papers, creaking chairs, whispered conversations, had died away. Every ear strained toward that speaker, where my daughter-in-law's voice was systematically destroying her own case. I felt the weight of eyes on me, but kept my gaze fixed on my pocket watch. Its brass case reflected the fluorescent lights, steady and unchanging, just like the truth finally emerging. Tom raised his hand, ready to play the final segment. My pulse quickened. I knew what was coming. Through the speaker's slight static, Karen's whisper emerged, barely audible but crystal clear in the hushed courtroom. "Do it now. The bank's release Friday." Author's note. Stopping here as this completes the required beat, showing the secret recording revealing Karen's involvement in coaching the forgery, ending on the specified line about bank releases. You know that moment when you can finally breathe again, when the weight lifts and your lungs remember how to work? That's what hit me as the recording clicked to silence. The watch kept ticking beneath my palm, but now it felt less like a countdown and more like steady ground under my feet. Judge Martinez adjusted her glasses, spreading several documents across the bench. "Mr. Jenkins, regarding the trust's transfer restriction clause, page and section." "Article 7, Section C, Your Honor," Tom replied, reaching for his binder. "Page 32 of the original trust instrument. The notary's stamp and my client's signature appear at the bottom, dated March 15th, 1998. The judge nodded, making a note. "And the alleged unauthorized account sweeps. 5 transactions between May 1st and June 15th of this year, Your Honor," Tom said, passing forward another document. "The bank records show attempts to move approximately $2.3 million into newly created sub-accounts, all pending final authorization this Friday." I watched Michael's shoulders tighten at the mention of the specific amount. Karen's fingers twisted in her lap, that same nervous tell I'd noticed when she'd grabbed the empty Father's Day card. "Mr. Delaney," Judge Martinez turned to me, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "Have you authorized any of these transfers?" "No, Your Honor." My voice came out clear and steady. "I maintain detailed records of every business transaction. These transfers were never discussed with me, let alone approved." She studied me for a long moment, then turned to the opposing counsel. "The court has heard testimony questioning Mr. Delaney's competence. However, his responses today have been clear and precise. The documentation provided demonstrates consistent business management, and this recording suggests deliberate attempts to circumvent his authority rather than any lack of capacity." The opposing counsel shifted his weight. "Your Honor, if we could have time to review—" "The court finds Frank Delaney competent to manage his affairs," Judge Martinez declared, her tone brooking no argument. "Given the evidence of potential fraud and the imminent transfer deadline, I am granting the emergency freeze on all associated accounts, effective immediately." The gallery stirred. I felt rather than saw the ripple of reaction spread through the courtroom. "Clerk," the judge continued, "prepare notices to all financial institutions listed in the motion. These transfers are suspended pending further review." She fixed Michael and Karen with a stern look. "Additionally, the recording presents serious evidence of attempted fraud. I'm setting a hearing for next week to address these allegations specifically." "Your Honor," the opposing counsel tried again, "we request a continuance to prepare—" "Denied." Judge Martinez's gavel cracked sharp and final. "This matter has time-sensitive implications. We'll proceed as scheduled." I glanced at Michael then, really looked at him for the first time since the recording played. He sat with his head bowed, staring at the floor, as if trying to find answers in the courthouse tiles. Beside him, Karen's lips were pressed so tight they'd gone bloodless. Remember that old saying about victory tasting sweet? Well, let me tell you, sometimes it tastes more like ashes. Watching my own son, unable to meet my eyes, seeing the woman he'd married shrink into herself as their scheme unraveled. There's no sweetness there, just necessity. Chairs scraped as people rose. The judge gathered her papers and swept out, while the clerk began organizing the freeze notices. When I stepped into the corridor, camera flashes popped like summer lightning. "Mr. Delaney, can you comment on the fraud allegations?" "Michael, is it true you forged your father's signature?" "Mrs. Delaney, what's your response to the recording?" Michael shouldered past the reporters without a word, Karen clutching his arm. More questions followed them down the hall. "What about the missing trust documents? How much money was involved? Will criminal charges be filed?" I stood there watching them retreat, the word fraud echoing off marble walls, and felt every one of my 75 years settle into my bones. The brass weight of my father's watch pressed against my palm, solid and unchanging. while my son's footsteps faded into the growing chorus of whispers. A week feels like a lifetime when you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. I spent those 7 days organizing records, signing bank reversals, and trying not to think about the empty spaces where family photos used to hang in Michael's living room. You know that hollow feeling when something precious breaks and you're left holding the pieces. That's what filled those quiet hours. The morning of the fraud hearing dawned clear and sharp. Summer in our town always smells like pine sap and fresh-cut grass, and that day was no different. I remember adjusting my tie in the mirror, the familiar movements grounding me like they had before thousands of business meetings. Funny how some habits stick, even when your world's turned sideways. Tom met me at the courthouse steps, his briefcase bulging with exhibits we probably wouldn't need. The recording had done most of our work for us. "Ready?" he asked, squinting against the morning glare. I patted my pocket where Dad's watch rested. "Been ready since Father's Day?" The courtroom felt smaller this time, more intimate without the previous week's crowd. Michael and Karen sat with their lawyer, both wearing expressions like they'd swallowed something bitter. The local paper had a reporter in the back row, pen poised. Judge Martinez wasted no time. The court has reviewed the authenticated recording and compared the questioned documents with verified samples. She lifted a page. The notary's detailed analysis confirms systematic forgery across multiple instruments. I watched Michael's jaw work. He'd picked up that tell in high school, grinding his teeth when caught in a lie about curfew or homework. Some things never change. Furthermore, the judge continued, the evidence shows a coordinated effort to manipulate trust documents and redirect substantial assets. She paused, scanning the room. This court finds clear and convincing evidence of fraud in the execution of these transfers. The reporter's pen scratched. Karen's shoulders curved inward. The temporary freeze is made permanent. All attempted transfers are void. Judge Martinez's words fell like hammer blows. The funds will revert to their original accounts under Mr. Delaney's sole control. $2.3 million, that's what they'd tried to sweep away, thinking I was too old or too trusting to notice. The money mattered less than what it represented. The careful dismantling of everything I'd built, piece by piece, signature by forged signature. Additionally, the judge said, this finding of fraud will be entered into the public record. The court notes with particular concern the breach of fiduciary duty and family trust. There it was, the second blow. In our town, reputation is currency. Michael and Karen had tried to steal my money, but they'd end up losing something worth far more. The judge signed the order with a flourish. We're adjourned. Chairs scraped. Camera shutters clicked. I heard fragments of the reporter's phone call. Fraudulent transfers and family business. Judge's ruling confirms. Michael and Karen hurried toward the door, but news travels fast in small towns. Neighbors who'd known me for decades lined the corridor, their whispers following my son and his wife like autumn leaves. Can't believe they'd try to steal from Frank. Always seemed so proper, but I guess you never know. His own father's signature. I took my time gathering my papers, letting them clear the building first. When I finally stepped outside, the late afternoon sun hit me like a warm hand on the shoulder. The courthouse steps were empty now, just me and the familiar smell of pine and sun-baked concrete. My fingers found Dad's watch, solid and real in my pocket. I drew it out, feeling the weight that had anchored 3 generations of Delaney men. The tick picked up its steady rhythm, same as it had the day he first handed it to me. Standing there, I held it up so the sunlight caught the glass. The face gleamed like a badge, like proof. The second hand swept past 12, marking time the way it always had, honest and true no matter who was watching. You want to know what victory really feels like? It's not the money back in the accounts or even the judge's words. It's standing tall with your father's watch in your hand, knowing you've defended something worth more than dollars. Something that can't be forged or stolen. I let the light play across the watch face one more time and said it quiet, just for myself. Respect is earned, not inherited.